But okay, now what we're going to do is take advantage of having Kit on the program, and indeed, as I mentioned at the opening, the events in Yugoslavia 30 years ago were very much dominating the headlines. And Patrick, you're going to give us more on that.
Well, yes, and we're looking at, we'll bring this up on screen here. The Yugoslavian War, obviously, people should understand that's 1991. To 1999. Sorry, typographic error there. But just to reiterate what the map looked like at the time, the breakup of Yugoslavia here, and they're talking in the news about the 30 years since Croatia's, quote, War of Independence. This is German state media, of course, but other outlets in Europe are saying something different. 30 years on, Operation Storm still divides the Balkans. And here I want to direct people to Kit Klarenberg's piece here at the Gray Zone. U.S.-backed ethnic cleansing of Serbs, top diplomat secretly told Croat leader. Let's bring Kit Klarenberg back onto the stage to talk about this. Kit, interesting development here, new documents, new information, or information that hasn't been looked at, but maybe was there. Explain to us what's behind this story. Mute. Mike.
So, yeah, sure. So August 4th marked the 30th anniversary, of Operation Storm, which is, I mean, very few people in the West know about. I'm quite surprised that there's been any critical media coverage of this whatsoever in the mainstream, but as you just demonstrated. But yeah, it's little known outside the former Yugoslavia, but it was a US planned military strike, which removed the entirety of Croatia's Serbian population, which is 300,000 people. Many were forced to flee on foot. The elderly and infirm who couldn't run away basically just got killed, and all of their property was either burned to the ground or stolen by Croatian forces. And yeah, it was the product of the US backing neo-Nazi forces and using them as quote unquote junkyard dogs to break up Yugoslavia. Does this sound familiar at all, to what's currently happening, or what the Western powers planned to happen in Donbass, but hasn't really worked out since February 2022, if not, February 2014, when the Ukrainian government was overthrown by a CIA, NED, MI6 coup?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the blitzkrieg that was planned that Russia intervened to prevent on February 25th, 2022. Of course, that's totally denied by the West. But Madeleine Albright and the entire U.S. foreign policy apparatus was very anti-Serb. So they're denying a Nakba, effectively, of the Serbian population in Croatia. That's effectively what happened there. And it's interesting. We'll bring up on screen here. This is Richard, we'll bring this up, a diplomat from the United States, Richard Holbrooke, who was a leading U.S. diplomat at the time, admits, we said publicly that we were concerned, but privately, you knew what we wanted. And he's talking here to, I believe, he's had a conversation with Tudjman, I believe was the leader in Croatia at the time. So it's admitted, Kit, the United States backed an actual pogrom in Europe not so long ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite remarkable because Franjo Tudjman was elected on an explicit platform of effectively removing Croatia's entire Serb population, which was like hundreds of thousands of people. On the campaign trail, he openly venerated the Ustasha, which was this kind of Nazi puppet state created in World War II by during the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia. They ruled with a brutality that shocked the Nazis themselves. They would do things like kill children by picking them up by the legs and smashing their heads into walls. They had dedicated camps for slaughtering women and children. Tudjman suggested that the Ustasha were a reflection of Croatia's desire for freedom and independence, and appointed several several former Ustasha exiles to his government. Of course, this instilled fear in Croatia's non-Croat population. And yes, the Operation Storm represented the culmination of a plan that was laid well in advance, and the US not only was well aware of, but greenlit. And yeah, it is celebrated today as Victory Day in Croatia, and you can see large crowds of people walking, often doing the Nazi salute as they do so in cities like Zagreb and Split. The parallels with the current conflict in Ukraine couldn't really be clearer, except that now the US is losing, which could well be on the verge of just total capitulation and leaving Ukraine to its own devices to be overrun by Russia. There have been reports that Putin and Trump are scheduled to speak next week. We shall see if anything comes of that. But yeah, the US negotiating position is certainly not very strong, and the US empire isn't what it once was, in the mid-90s.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Kit. It's a very important story. It's also important to put this important historical event into context. So much of what's happened in Europe and the Balkans and now Ukraine, it's the West and Britain and some of the European NATO members always exploiting all of these tensions that arose during the early part and middle of the 20th century, and still trying to get mileage out of these divisions that were created from past wars. And it seems like they're coming to the end of this playbook. Hopefully that's the case.
Yeah, really important. And with such a sort of constant battering from the ever-evolving news cycle, people are so quick to forget. And I think that it's exactly right to make sure that people don't forget what's happened and do have an accurate version of events. So, Kit, thanks very much for that.
And now, that article is at the Grey Zone.
Yes, it is. And there'll be links. Sorry, all of this that's been referred to will be linked in the show notes. So